You see, silence is misunderstood in a loud world. People assume if you're not speaking, you're defeated. If you're not clapping back, you're weak. But silence, real, intentional silence, is not surrender. It is strategy, it is strength restrained. It is the moment right before the storm when the sky looks calm, but pressure is building. And when an empath goes silent, it's not because they have nothing left to say. It's because they've finally realized that no amount of talking can reach someone who worships their own voice. For too long, the empath gave explanations, hoping the narcissist would understand. They pleaded, repeated themselves, bent their boundaries, softened their voice, and swallowed their pain. But the narcissist wasn't listening. They were calculating. Every reaction, every tear, every trembling tone became data for manipulation. The more the empath expressed, the more ammunition the narcissist had to twist, use, and throw back in their face. And so the day came, not with thunder, not with shouting, but with stillness. The empath went quiet. And that was the beginning of judgment. You see, silence isn't the absence of words. It's the absence of access. It says, you don't get my energy anymore. You don't get my explanations, my reactions, or my vulnerability. It's a quiet boundary that roars louder than any argument. It's the soul's way of saying, I'm done dancing with your chaos. And that silence, that calm resolve, hits harder than anything the empath ever said out loud, because now the narcissist has nothing to push against, no fire to fuel, no emotion to feed off. They're left with their own emptiness, their own lies echoing back at them. And while the narcissist scrambles to provoke, to bait, to resurrect the old cycle, the empath stays still, not cold, not cruel, but clear. They've seen the game. They've seen how the narcissist spins truth into confusion, pain into guilt, and love into leverage. And they've made a decision, a final one. Silence, because silence is not retreat. It's a return to self, to peace, to purpose. It is what happens when the empath stops focusing on saving someone else and starts reclaiming themselves. And that's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it holy. That's what makes it dangerous, not to the empath, but to the lie. And on that day, the narcissist felt it. Not a slap, not a scream, but the piercing reality that the person they once controlled had gone still, gone silent. And that silence, it spoke a truth too heavy for the narcissist to carry, because silence is where judgment begins. The narcissist feeds on noise. They crave attention, drama, reaction, any kind of energy, whether positive or negative, just so long as it's centered on them. They survive off of emotional chaos, and the more entangled the empath becomes, the stronger the narcissist feels. It's not love they want, it's control, it's spotlight. And every tear the empath sheds, every outburst, every long paragraph trying to explain the hurt only makes the narcissist feel more powerful. Because as long as the empath is reacting, the narcissist is winning. That's the arena they live in: emotional confusion, manipulation, cloaked as misunderstanding, lies dressed up like love. But silence is where the narcissist begins to drown, because they don't know what to do with stillness. It terrifies them. When the empath no longer responds, the narcissist loses their power source. Suddenly, the performance falls flat. There's no one clapping, no one arguing, no one defending or chasing. And for someone who thrives on being the center of attention, nothing is more dangerous than being ignored by the one they used to control. That's the day the power shifts, not with a fight, but with an absence. And they feel it.
Oh, they feel it deep.
Because silence exposes everything the noise used to cover up. The lies, the manipulation, the false apologies, the twisted narratives, they all lose their power when there's no one left to argue with. That's when the narcissist is left alone with their own emptiness, with no drama to hide behind. And that silence becomes a mirror. It reflects their true self back to them, something they've spent a lifetime running from. They might try harder at first. They might escalate, say wilder things, fake apologies, invent new reasons to reach out. But all of it is just noise, desperate noise, because they don't understand that the empath is no longer playing. They're not mad. They're not bitter. They're just done. And when a person is done, there is no discussion, no explanation, no final words, just silence. And that silence screams louder than any confrontation ever could. It's the sound of boundaries being built. It's the sound of peace being restored. It's the sound of chains falling off a soul that refused to stay bound. Because silence is not passive. It's protective. It guards what's left. It honors what was broken. It tells the narcissist, without saying a word, you don't get to rewrite the story anymore. And the narcissist, for all their manipulation, cannot argue with silence. They can't twist it, can't flip it, can't use it against the empath because it offers nothing to work with. No emotion, no entry point, just the void they created for themselves, now echoing back louder than ever. That's the moment they realize the game is over. The empath's silence is more than an escape. It's a mirror the narcissist never wanted to face. You see, as long as the empath is speaking, explaining, defending, or reacting, the narcissist can stay busy twisting the narrative, projecting their faults, and painting themselves as the victim. That noise becomes their cover. But the moment the empath grows silent, something unsettling happens. The narcissist is left alone with their own voice. And without someone to blame, without someone to argue with, they are forced to look at themselves. That mirror doesn't lie. That mirror doesn't flatter. That mirror shows them the truth they've been hiding from under layers of manipulation and self-deception. And it's not just silence, it's reflection. The narcissist begins to see the wreckage they've caused, not through accusations or confrontation, but in the stillness of what's no longer available to them. The empath's presence, once full of grace and warmth, is now distant, cold, unbothered. That absence stings more than any angry words ever could, because it's final, it's unmoved. It shows the narcissist something they can't stand to admit. The damage wasn't just done, it was noticed. The game wasn't just played, it was exposed. The act wasn't just performed, it was seen through. And the narcissist has never known what to do with someone who truly sees them. They can charm, they can lie, they can manipulate most, but not someone who has awakened, not someone who's stepped back far enough to see clearly. And in that silence, the empath is no longer a participant. They become a witness to the truth the narcissist tried so hard to bury under denial and distortion. That mirror begins to whisper, not shout. This is who you are when no one's around. This is what you look like without control. This is the emptiness you cover with chaos. And the narcissist, for all their ego, cannot handle that kind of exposure. They need distractions. They need someone else's emotion to mask their own void. But silence doesn't offer that. Silence holds up the truth like a reflection they can't escape. And the narcissist begins to feel the weight of everything they denied. Every lie told, every boundary crossed, every heart they tried to twist into submission. All of it becomes visible in that mirror. And while the narcissist wrestles with their reflection, the empath stands still, not in bitterness, not in revenge, but in strength. They know they don't need to shout to reveal the truth. They just need to step out of the way and let the narcissist face what they've always been afraid to see themselves. And sometimes the loudest revelation comes not from words, but from the silence that forces a man to confront who he really is. When the empath steps back, something powerful happens. It's not just that they stop reacting. It's that emotion takes a seat and truth stands up. You see, as long as the empath is wrapped up in the emotional tug of war with the narcissist, the truth gets buried under feelings. Pain, confusion, guilt, even hope, they all become noise. The narcissist knows this. They rely on it. They provoke emotion to blur reality. They twist words and manipulate reactions to make the empath question their own perception. And for a time it works. The empath, driven by a sincere heart, keeps trying to fix what was never theirs to carry. But then comes the turning point. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, steady. The empath no longer reacts, not because they're numb, but because they finally see. Emotion has served its purpose. It revealed the wound. Now truth does the healing. And when truth steps forward, it doesn't scream. It doesn't argue. It simply stands firm. It reveals what always was, beneath the charm, beyond the gaslighting, behind the facade. The narcissist can't handle that kind of clarity. They're not built for truth. They're built for illusion. And truth doesn't need to fight lies. It just needs space to be seen. That's what the empath creates when they grow silent. Not silence as a punishment, but as a clearing. And in that clearing, the narcissist's words no longer carry weight. Their accusations fall flat. Their manipulations lose grip. Why? Because the empath is no longer trying to convince them of anything. The need to be understood is gone. The need to explain, defend, prove, it's gone. And when that emotional smoke clears, truth is what's left standing. The narcissist may continue talking, may keep spinning their story, but now it's obvious who's lying, not because the empath said so, but because their silence let the truth surface on its own. There's a power in not reacting that speaks louder than all the shouting in the world. It says, I know what you are. I know what I am. And I don't need your agreement to stand in that truth. That's when everything changes. The narcissist used to pull the strings, used to provoke a response, used to bait the empath into emotional storms just to watch them drown. But now the waters are still. The storms are gone. And the only sound left is the quiet weight of truth pressing in. And the most dangerous part for the narcissist isn't that they've been exposed to others, it's that they've been exposed to themselves. Because in that stillness, they finally feel the vacuum where integrity should have been, where empathy should have lived, where love should have taken root. And nothing they say, no matter how polished or persuasive, can cover that kind of void anymore. That's what happens when the empath stops feeling and starts seeing. Lies collapse on their own when there's nothing left to hold them up. There is a difference between silence that comes from being broken and silence that comes from being healed. One is full of fear, the other full of clarity. The empath used to be loud in their pain, not because they wanted attention, but because they were trying to be understood. They were trying to fix, to repair, to bring peace where there was only disorder. That kind of silence, the silence of a broken soul, comes after exhaustion. It comes when someone has given so much of themselves that they no longer have the strength to speak. But the silence I'm talking about now is different. This is the silence of the healed, and it is more powerful than any scream from a wounded heart. You see, when the empath was broken, they cried, they begged, they tried to hold the pieces together. They argued, not because they loved conflict, but because they loved the person who kept causing it. But healing changes you. Healing doesn't make you louder. It makes you wiser. It makes you quieter. And when that empath has gone through the fire, when they've seen the truth for what it is and walked through the pain without letting it define them, something inside shifts. They no longer need to be heard by the one who refused to listen. They no longer need to be seen by the one who chose blindness. That's when the empath goes silent, not in defeat, but in strength. That silence isn't cold. It isn't cruel. it's clean, it's full, it's grounded. And the narcissist feels it. They feel it like a void where their power used to live, because they can't manipulate what won't respond. They can't bait what won't bite. They can't distort what refuses to engage. That healed silence doesn't invite chaos. It repels it. It's not up for debate. It doesn't entertain confusion. It doesn't justify itself. It just exists steady, clear, unshaken. And that's what makes it so dangerous to someone who thrived on the chaos of the empath's pain. Now the empath walks differently. They move with a peace that cannot be faked. They no longer over-explain, no longer second-guess, no longer need closure from someone who was never open to truth in the first place. That healed silence says, I have seen enough, I have felt enough, and nothing shakes a narcissist more than a soul they used to break now walking in unbothered peace. The empath's power was never in their words. It was in their heart. And now that heart has been guarded, restored, renewed. That's why their silence is so loud. It carries the weight of every battle they chose to no longer fight. It's the sound of growth, of wisdom, of dignity. Because when a healed empath goes silent, it's not emptiness you're hearing. It's strength wrapped in stillness. God doesn't have to shout to make himself heard. He doesn't need chaos to prove his presence. He moves in stillness, in clarity, in peace. And that's where the empath finds power, not in noise, not in emotional warfare, but in quiet obedience to that still, small voice that says, be still and know. You see, when the empath breaks away from the narcissist, it's not just a personal decision. It's a spiritual shift, because what they're stepping into isn't just silence. It's alignment with truth, with purpose, with God's hand pulling them out of a counterfeit connection and placing them back where they belong. The narcissist used volume. They used drama. They used manipulation to cloud the atmosphere. And for a while it worked. The empath confused noise with connection. But noise doesn't mean truth. Chaos doesn't mean closeness. In fact, it's often in the loudest places that we miss the most important things. That's why God speaks through peace. Because peace doesn't compete, it just is. It doesn't demand your attention, it invites it. It says, when you're done running, when you're done fixing, when you're done trying to be the savior, I'll still be here. That's when the empath learns to listen differently. No longer listening to the narcissist's lies or their own overthinking. They start listening to that still voice inside, the one that was buried under confusion and emotional fatigue. And in that stillness, they find direction. They find freedom. They find the courage to walk away without bitterness and the strength to remain silent, not out of fear, but out of faith. The narcissist will never understand that kind of silence. To them, silence is a tactic, a way to punish or control. But the empath's silence isn't manipulative. It's sacred. It's a boundary drawn in the presence of God, saying, I will not return to what he brought me out of. And that boundary isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Because when God establishes a wall, it doesn't crumble under guilt, pressure, or false repentance. And it's in that holy silence that judgment begins, not man's judgment, but God's. Not out of vengeance, but out of justice. Because God sees what was done in the dark. He hears what was said behind the smile. And when the empath finally lets go, heaven leans in, not to watch a fight, but to restore what was lost, to redeem what was stolen, to replace tears with strength and confusion with peace. So while the narcissist is still spinning stories, still chasing control, still trying to provoke a reaction, the empath walks forward, quiet, calm, covered, because they're no longer fighting for their voice to be heard. They've been heard by the only one who matters. And in that silence, a greater voice is speaking, one the narcissist will never be able to silence, That's the kind of silence that shakes the earth.